Things are weird, aren't they? We've talked about on the show multiple times, but this election it's weird. It's got weird vibes and really don't know what to make of it because so much corruption and so much haziness is happening around our politics and around our politicians these days. Obviously, Carney, Poilievre, still out on the campaign trail as we move and turn into the second half of the election cycle. And you want to keep hearing more of their plans and their policies, especially you really want to hear what Carney's policies are because he continues to kind of put out phrases, but there's no concrete action plans that are going along with them. Whereas Poilievre, he's released a pretty comprehensive platform to the point now he's kind of needing to repeat himself at this point, which is good. We need to kind of keep that pushing what you want to do forward so people get it in their minds of like, hey, this is what you're going to get with this candidate. We think it's important. So naturally, we're at a point where you want to keep hearing from the politicians, but there are times where reporters can't help but make it about themselves. And I get it. You have a job to do. I understand that you have a following. People know you. They're starting to understand who you are. I completely get it. But here's the thing. I'm just a YouTuber. I'm just a podcaster. But I know my role and I shut my mouth. I stay in my lane. I don't try to make it about myself. Even going to the different campaign events and people recognizing you and people knowing you. I thank you. I'm grateful for the kind words and grateful for what thoughtfulness of sharing how you're moved by the show. It means the world. But I know I'm not the center of the story, and I never should be. I should only be the talking head on screen who's reporting the news. But sometimes, reporters forget about that. Those in the media forget about that. They're just a conduit. I'm just a conduit for you to get access to information. Plain and simple, I know my role and I shut my mouth outside of that. I'm not a politician. I'm not affecting policy. I'm just here to report the news and look at different nuances and go into a little deeper on things just so you get a clear view of what is happening in our country. But today, we had a CTV correspondent getting a little upset on social media today. So upset that she decided to break the rules of the Poilievre campaign and start shouting over reporters to get a follow-up question in when she wasn't designated to ask a question at the Poilievre press conference. And obviously, Pierre Poilievre in some ways dismissed her and it didn't get received well, but we'll show you what the clip is and then we'll kind of get into the backstory of what kind of happened. So you have Poilievre, who's on campaign. And he's taking questions, and he's taken multiple questions at this point, and he's taken the final questions from Radio Canada. And then all of a sudden, from in front of him, which is probably about 60 feet in front of him, there's a reporter who doesn't have a mic who starts yelling over top the other reporters.
Will not allow, and I will not allow, and I will not allow that kind of thing to happen anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now take a call-in question from the phone line, and this will be the final question.
Laurence Martin, Radio Canada.
Sorry, I'm listening to the question. Sorry, there's just a protester here. Go ahead. Sorry. Is there? We're listening. We're trying to listen for the next person who was up asking a question. I think it's nous avons besoin d'une question en français. Est-ce que c'est ça?
So you can hear the yelling in the background. Person doesn't have a mic. They're trying to yell over their questions and. You know, Pierre Poilievre, I'll be honest, he's playing coy. He knows who Judy Trin is, who is the CTV correspondent here. He knows he's interacted with her, and there's only a handful of people at this event. He knows who's there. This is a media-only event for the most part. There are no supporters there. These are just media members. So he's like, hey, there's a protester here. I'm trying to listen to the next question here. You know, he just doesn't want to engage in it because they have a process the Conservative Party is engaged in at this point. Reporters might not like it. The media might not like it. And quite frankly, I don't really like it. I kind of wish you'd take on more questions, but it is what it is. This is the rules of the campaign. They're going to have to deal with the repercussions, or if there are repercussions for doing things that way. But this is the issue. Is Judy Trin is behind the scenes in Sault Ste. Marie talking about, oh man, we are gated in. We are penned in to this one area. And this open concrete parking lot. Why do we have barricades around us? That's her question here. And that's making it sound like they're like in jail. I'm like, there's only a handful of media there. And was talking to other media members and people who have worked in this for a long time. This isn't unnormal. This is actually quite normal for media, especially when the reason why they kind of quadrant off media because they don't want people walking in front of the wide angle shot. It's mainly for cameras, if I'm being quite frank. But she's acting as if this is totally foreign, this is not how it works, as if in some ways reporters' rights are being restricted. That's kind of how it's coming across. But then she goes on to create this thread. And she's like, this is my view of Pierre Poilievre unless I choose to lean over the metal barricade and this is it. And this is, you know, a selfie of her. 4 reporters are pre-selected for questions for Pierre Poilievre, 2 local journalists from Sault Ste. Marie, 1 from Canadian Press, and 1 from Franco Press. This is my first Conservative campaign media conference, so I'm going to document how it works behind the scenes. And no, I'm not getting a question. And then she kind of goes on to show these videos. A space is opened up on the riser as camera operators pull back to take wide shots. And then she highlights how the system is working here. You have Pierre Poilievre's media guy who's holding the mic for reporters, and they are there to ask questions. Judy thought this was a very odd thing for him to do. And again, we'll play the first 5 seconds or 10 seconds of this.
Tariffs are a serious issue for both the workers, the steel workers, and the community overall.
And so that's kind of how the setup is. There's speakers up. Pierre can hear them. They're, probably, 50, 60 feet away, and he's gathering what they're asking him. Judy Trinh made sure to call out Carson here holding the mic, and she made sure to make a huge issue of it. She says, "Here's the Sioux Today reporter, Greg McGrath Gowdy, with a question about opioids and what Pierre Poilievre would do about it. Notice how conservative a media handler holds the microphone. Usually, reporters queue and walk up to a mic stand and walk away from after we are done. Usually. But that's just not how the setup is here. It's clearly, from my perspective, this setup is kind of a skeleton crew, and they're doing the thing. Is it weird? I don't know. I haven't been to enough of these. But when I've talked to people in the industry, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. It's just how it goes. And especially if they're going to be strict about this 4-question rule, then it makes sense that the handler is going to be the one administering the mic. And then she plays a video of the question that became the issue. And that's the BJP, which is the party in India, which is the party that Mr. Modi is head of in India. And the question was asked, you have people that have donated to the Poilievre campaign out of India who are connected to the BJP. Are you worried about foreign interference? That was kind of the question. Here it is.
Craig Lord with the Canadian Press. I want to ask you about a global news report this morning detailing donations and support you've received from the overseas friends of the BJP, Narendra Modi's party in India. How comfortable are you receiving support from friends of the BJP, given that members of that party are allegedly behind violence against Sikh separatists here in Canada?
Well, first of all, I received 37,000 separate donations that anybody can make online. We don't have the capacity to do CSIS background checks on every single person who...
Judy cuts off the answer there, but you get the gist of where Poilievre was going with that. And this is where it gets interesting, because that's kind of the end of the video log of Judy Trinh. Then it leans into the clip that we talked about originally, where she starts yelling over other reporters, trying to get Pierre's attention without a mic. And the problem we have with that is she's asking essentially the same question that he just asked in this video. So why do you have to take the spotlight and have to re-ask that question? You call it a follow-up, but you were essentially asking the same question. Because in this thread, she documents what Pierre Poilievre's answer was and details essentially a transcription of it. Then she comes in with this message and says, at this point, I yell out my question about Pierre Poilievre's refusal to get a security clearance. I'm yelling because I'm 25 meters away from the conservative leader without access to a microphone. He doesn't take follow-up questions. Mr. Poilievre then calls me a protester. And this is the thing where I get conflicted, right? Because I think Judy Trinh's been doing great work. I think overall she's a good correspondent for CTV. She's been fair to both sides for the most part. And people make mistakes. It is how it goes. But the problem I have with this, Poilievre dismissing her as a protester, I don't think is a good look. But as well, I don't think Judy Trinh doing what she did was a good look for her. It was a bad look on her behalf. This isn't how you're supposed to operate. You know the rules going in, you understand, you agree to them, and then you try to hijack the event to be able to get your question that actually had nothing to do with really anything. Because as I said, you tried to ask a follow-up. She laid out what the question was here, what she was yelling to Pierre Poilievre. And you catch it? She was asking about his security clearance. Again, this is a question he's answered multiple times over. It's been debunked, discussed by multiple outlets, by other former leaders like Mulclair, who says this isn't as big of a deal and it's quite frankly a nothing burger. He's not putting anyone at risk. He's not putting the country at risk. He's not putting himself at risk. He's not putting his party at risk. He's gone through what he needs to go through. And this is purely and clearly a political tactic for the Liberals to use to get Canadians distracted, making him look like he's dangerous. And this is what I thought was disingenuous about Judy Trinh doing this. First, you break away from the rules that the party had laid out for the press, and then you ask a question that is just old news at this point. We understand, we get it. Why do you need to keep insisting? So why try to draw attention to yourself to ask a question that's outdated? That was the problem with what happened here today. And Judy Trinh made sure to finish off saying, for the record, Mr. Poilievre knows I'm a member of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. I've asked him questions on the Hill. Also, during this election, I've asked Mark Carney questions about Chinese foreign interference in Brookfield when I was following the Liberal campaign. And she's not wrong. She was actually very tough on Carney. But again, this was a question that's been asked multiple times over, and it's proven to be a nothing burger. Time and time again, it's just a political wedge issue. I would have been easier on Judy in this situation if she asked a legitimate question. Like if even we saw the level of foreign interference we're seeing around Mark Carney, and that was happening around Pierre Poilievre, I would 100% want questions about it. But right now, there's nothing there. So that's why I had an issue with her making it really about herself in this scenario and not about getting information for Canadians. This was about her career and how she looked. From my perspective, it was a bad look. This was Pierre Poilievre's full answer to the initial question that came in about the BJP, and I'll play it for you, and this is what Pierre Poilievre had to say about it.
Well, first of all, I received 37,000 separate donations that anybody can make online. We don't have the capacity to do CSIS background checks on every single person who makes those 37,000 donations. We condemn 100% any foreign interference in Canada, and anyone who collaborates with it should be jailed. But the real question you should be asking is, why haven't the Liberals got the foreign agent registry up and running? Because then we would know proactively who is working on behalf of a foreign government. And then parties could actually go through their lists of donations and find out if there is anybody who's been a bad actor. But they haven't set that up, even though it was passed into law by Parliament. The other question that you should be asking is, why is Mark Carney accepting campaign support from the Chinese Communist government? You know, here he is. He was just in China a few months ago, arranging a $250 million loan for his company, a company in which he still has millions of dollars of interest. And now we find that the government in Beijing is actively interfering to campaign on behalf of Mr. Carney. I note that the government in Beijing was attacking his leadership rival, Chrystia Freeland, during the leadership race. And now they're pushing out propaganda to support his campaign again. He is conflicted. He continues to have financial interests in foreign hostile regimes in the hundreds of millions of dollars while he is Prime Minister of Canada. That is the real foreign interference that we should be worried about, and it is the foreign interference that I will end. After the lost Liberal decade, they have turned this country in.
And he goes on to finish that. But he addresses some very real issues. And yes, questions about the BJP. You know, you're getting some people from that party who are donated to your campaign. All right. Yeah, we haven't looked into it. Don't know much about it, but I haven't really had any contact with them. So that's an issue. We can talk about it. The thing is, we would know about it if the Liberals had followed up on a bill that was passed through Parliament, Bill C-70, back in June of last year. Why hasn't the foreign agent registry been set up? I don't know. Is it maybe because Liberals are benefiting from foreign interference and then leveraging the fear of foreign interference against their political opponents? We saw it with Chandra Arya. We saw it with Ruby Dalla. We saw it with Pierre Poilievre and his security clearance. All that political BS and wedge issues. As soon as someone becomes inconvenient to the machine and becomes inconvenient to the establishment, all of a sudden, the foreign interference is thrown at them. However, they've done nothing to deal with the foreign interference in this country. They passed a bill that they haven't taken any action on. Bill C-70. Again, just to make sure, got royal sent June 20th, 2024. And nothing has been done. Why? You knew an election was coming. You knew an election, maybe it came a little earlier than we were expecting, but it was within the same year. Why hasn't anything been done? I don't know. As I said, is it because you benefit from it? You have Pocket Aces here who brought up the issue of yesterday. He posted a thread about Mark Carney's forthcoming book, and it's focused on the net zero revolution and the AI transformation. And his book is called Hinged, and the release date has been pushed back multiple times at this point. It was supposed to be out, I think, this month. It's supposed to be out this month. All of a sudden, election gets called, gets pushed to July. Weird. Funny how that works. And again, Mark Carney's forthcoming book, and it's focused on the net zero revolution, the AI transformation. Since then, it's been revealed that China's been boosting Carney, which broke out late last week, earlier this week. And then reporter Andy Lee puts it all into context. She pulls up an old interview from last year Mark Carney did with the China Central Television during China Development Forum meetings in Beijing on March 25th, 2024. He says in this interview how China has an important leadership role on climate change, on Chinese Central Television, and here it is.
Particularly around China's leadership in climate change and the further acceleration that's necessary for that. That's a crucial discussion, as is the discussion around AI and really the application of AI. We see China's leadership there in deployment of AI technologies, which is in many respects unique, and we can all learn from that and work together.
Here we are, Mark Carney shilling for AI. You know, and it can be kind of seen like, well, AI is the future. Everyone's talking about it. I get it. Well, it is kind of interesting because Andy Lee then added more flesh to the story, where she says, Mark Carney's been discussing the expanding applications of artificial intelligence and building out data processing centers on an awful lot lately. And guess why? Brookfield just purchased a company in the business of AI for $1.7 billion. How are those stock options looking? And here we are. Invent complete sale of thermal management business, a global leader in electrical connection and protection solutions, today announced that it has completed the previously announced sale of its thermal management business to funds managed by Brookfield Asset Management for a sale price of $1.7 billion, subject to customary adjustments. And that is their website, data centers and networking. Funny how that all works, eh? Carney's cozying up to China because he sees them as a leader. He sees them as he can be connected to them to make money off of them, make money from them, and leverage his position in politics to make more money, the AI revolution. And he's going to keep shilling for it. He's going to keep pushing it because he's making money off it, as he has multiple shares and options in Brookfield. Even though it's in a blind trust, we know that they're in Brookfield. And he will be pushing policy to make sure Brookfield benefits from Canadian policy. We even see it today. Carney on the campaign trail talking about clean energy, clean fuel. And man, does it sound eerily similar or something? Watch the minute and a half here, and we'll get to what this should be reminding you of.
Superpower. We also need to get more conventional energy built, with a focus on making it as clean as possible, because we can't lose sight of our responsibility to address climate change. And we can't lose sight of the imperative to ensure the long-term competitiveness of our conventional energy sector. And that starts with recognizing the facts. As the world shifts to using lower carbon energy, increasingly only the cleanest oil and gas will be consumed. Our oil and gas industry recognizes this. They're committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and so are we. Now, the time for analysis of how to get there is ending. My government is focused on results, and the results of the current consultation on the emissions cap will reflect the importance of efficiently and fairly achieving these objectives. My government will work closely with our oil and gas industry to reduce their emissions over time, so that Canadian conventional energy will supply the world for decades to come.
Only the cleanest oil and gas will make sure that we'll supply the world for years to come, decades to come. What does the cleanest oil and gas look like? Again, you've heard this from politicians before, where obviously you want to burn cleanly, you want to do that properly. But when this reminds you of this interview from last year, people start having questions. All right, what are you going to do to make it the cleanest energy possible?
2% of global emissions is for air travel, emissions from air travel. Now, so the question is, are we going to have green sustainable aviation fuel? What's happened in the UK, the EU, is they've said to major airlines, look, if you're flying in and out of Heathrow or wherever, you have to have 10% of your load has to be sustainable aviation fuel by, I think it's 2030. Consequence of that policy has been to convert some entrepreneurs in Texas, in this case a company called Infineon, to become economic, because all of a sudden American Airlines, British Airways need to buy that fuel. They'll pay a green premium. You've got an offtake, that's high credit quality, and so in that case, we Brookfield put $1 billion to work there, and it's a fantastic opportunity.
So what are you going to do with Canada's resources, Mark Carney? What are you up to? Because somehow, some way, Brookfield's going to be invested in Canadian resources. What are you going to do to sell us out so that Brookfield can make $1? That is a question Canadians have. And Mr. Michael Barrett, MP Michael Barrett, made sure to call this out himself. Says Mark Carney's $1 billion heat pump plan could deliver big profits for him and his friends at Brookfield, but he still refuses to disclose his assets and financial interests. Canadians deserve to know the truth about these serious conflicts of interest. There must be an investigation. It's the Conservative Party putting forward a letter to the Commissioner of Lobbying saying, I'm writing to draw attention to remarks made by Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday, which raised serious concerns about conflicts of interest. On Tuesday, April 8th, 2025, Mr. Carney announced his intention to spend $1 billion on heat pumps, a decision which could clearly benefit companies in the heat pump business. Brookfield Infrastructure is the flagship listed infrastructure company of Brookfield Asset Management. Brookfield Infrastructure in turn owns Ontario-based Enercare, which specifically advertises heat pump retrofits as one of its offered services, including taking advantage of government rebate programs. This is what you're going to get with Mark Carney. We'll continue to push policies and programs that will funnel Canadian taxes to the Brookfield family of companies. That is what you're going to get a heck of a lot more of. And won't be looking to put funds back into Canadians' pockets. No, it'll be looking to extract from the working class to the global elite in our world. In the midst of all this craziness, though, we have Trump slapping China with 104% tariffs today. The trade war is getting real against and between two of the largest financial superpowers in the world. The Trump administration will hit China with 104% tariffs starting at 12:01 Wednesday, the White House said Tuesday. President Donald Trump had threatened an extra 50% on tariffs against China in addition to an additional 20% that was supplemented by 34% reciprocal levies Wednesday after Beijing said it would respond with 34% tax of its own. On Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt told reporters the full package of more than 100% in levies would kick in overnight. This is what we are witnessing in our world currently. We have Donald Trump who's trying to realign the world order from a financial perspective, trying to send it into a different direction from globalization. And you have the China's of the world who's been benefiting from globalization. Because what's been happening is manufacturing and jobs have been getting extracted out of the West and moved over to China, leaving our people with no work and nothing to really live for. This is the problem. You have all these big companies that are using the slave labor in China to get rich while taking away jobs from the West. And all this tariff nonsense, all the crazy rhetoric, what we're seeing is all a big plan right now to realign the economic order in the world so that, in this case, America stops getting ripped off and they're able to bring jobs back to their country. And at the same time, they're starting to get really rough on China. They're going to start getting real rough on China. 104% tariff means things are going to get drastically more expensive if you do your manufacturing in China to sell in the United States. Things are about to get really crazy, really quick. You're going to see businesses overnight just gone because that's their whole business is built on. And this is the issue that hits us in Canada. Look how hard Trump is going at China. He's got his sights set on China. He wants to seclude China, and he wants to make sure they feel maximum pain and take away all their economic power. And this is the problem I have. We have Mark Carney running in this election, who's clearly being helped by Beijing and the CCP to win this election, because he aligns more with China. We see all the proof. We've talked about it. We've gone through it. He says, I don't know why they're supporting me. He knows very well. And this is what's dangerous, is if Trump is getting that aggressive with China and say Mark Carney wins and he tries to align Canada with China and continues to try to be in opposition to Trump and the Americans, what's going to happen to us? We can't stand in the way of all that. It'll be interesting to see how it all goes down. But anyways, have yourselves a good one. I'm out.